Hey everyone, this is part number 2 of our discussion about school reform from ESEA to ESSA. It picks up right where we left off in part number 1. Welcome back. As you think over the course of the decades, you've spent, from the Nixon White House to working in the Reagan Department of Education and onward, are there lessons that stick out in your mind, things that you've learned that maybe should have been painfully obvious at the beginning but weren't?
Well, let's be clear. Nothing is ever painfully obvious at the beginning of any public policy. Every public policy that I've ever encountered at any level of government is a set of hopes and compromises. It is never based on proven certainty and universal agreement. And incidentally, this is the same is true in the medical field, except there the FDA attempts for you to demonstrate safety and efficacy before you do it on a large scale. Well, we've never required social policy to demonstrate either safety or efficacy, certainly not efficacy, before you undertake it. So a lot of this is on a kind of wish and a hope and a conjecture and response to a pressure group and a compromise with the people that don't want it to happen. So you always end up doing part of what you want to do. The original voucher experiment in America, known as the Alum Rock experiment, I believe this goes back to the 70s, in California, was supposed to experiment with vouchers. By the time it was compromised into occurring, it was limited to public schools in the desert. That's where Alum Rock is, and only public schools could participate. So what kind of a voucher experiment is that?
And yet Rand Corporation got 3 volumes out of its evaluation.
Well, Rand benefited. My mentor, the late Pat Moynihan, always referred to what he called feeding the sparrows by feeding the horses. We're trying to help poor people get to better schools in Alum Rock, but in fact we're helping the PhDs at the Rand Corporation to get publications and bigger paychecks.
If you think about, when you think about it this way, is there a policy that comes to mind that people really got it right? That it worked the way folks had intended for it to work, that you were impressed by the skill of the policymakers?
Well, worked always in a limited way without regard for the unintended consequences, okay? I mean, the race to the top certainly proved that if you dangle a bunch of federal money in front of states in order to get them to do things differently, they will respond. At least they will go through the motions of promising to respond in order to get the money. This is a pretty simple Pavlovian response to, in this case, a bunch of federal money. It works, okay? Did they live up to their promises? Did the things they promised to do work well? Did they always do what they promised? Were the premises behind the promises sound? You get into tricky areas, as the race to the top did. And among other things, incidentally, it led us into the whole debacle over Common Core standards. The race to the top effort did. And as a result, our effort to improve academic standards for kids around the country encountered many setbacks due to the controversy over Common Core, which was triggered by race to the top. Okay, it was a legitimate effort to get states to pledge to higher standards.
Is there an example of a policy where you're like, wow, that created much less blowback and many fewer perverse incentives than some of these other initiatives?
The 65-mile-an-hour speed limit?
What's the funny thing there? It's right, there's not a lot of delicacy around implementation.
And there are cameras now all over the place. They periodically nab me, not usually at 65, it's in the 25-mile-an-hour zones. But yes, and there's blowback, of course. Everybody hates those cameras, I mean, with a fury. And now they have to put up signs telling you there's a camera because a sort of secret camera is utterly unacceptable in America. So they put up a sign saying there's a camera. And then they see if you can slow down in response. I mean, this is a simple-minded example. It has nothing directly to do with education.
Although, I mean, it's similar to class size limits or textbook procurement
yes.
requirements that policy seems to work pretty well when
Yeah.
there's not a lot of room for the cup to slip between the
Correct.
Whereas when we get to more complicated stuff, it often
Well,
seems.
I'm going to push back on you. Class size limits have produced all kinds of perverse consequences where less competent teachers have been employed in order to reduce class sizes. Do kids benefit from a smaller class with a worse teacher? Okay, yeah, it works in that you can make somebody reduce their class size by building more classrooms, which incidentally is a construction cost, and hiring more teachers, which is a quality question. So good policy, bad policy.
Beautiful. You know, Checker, you've been mentoring folks coming into this space for a long time now, especially for viewers who maybe are, you know, thinking about going to education like you once were, or who are, you know, only a little ways into their career. What are there thoughts, or there suggestions? Is there a little wisdom you've shared over time with folks about how to be effective at this, about how to think about what it means to be, you know, a positive force when it comes to education policy?
Well, the first point is this is a field worth being in and important to be in, and you shouldn't swap it for Goldman Sachs or your father's law firm. This is important for the country. It's important for kids. It's important for a lot of good reasons that people work hard in this field, and millions of people do, including millions of people whose most important work is being in the classroom with those kids every single day. So hats off to them. For people that are going to work in sort of the policy and research space, stick with it, think big, but don't expect big things. Important to put your eye on big goals, like whether it's more choices or higher standards or greater accountability or better teachers. I mean, there's some big topics, and it's worth getting to be a bit of a specialist and sort of knowing something about the ins and outs of a big topic. But don't expect that big topic to yield a big change the day after tomorrow, because they're all incremental in the real world, which can get people frustrated and kind of impatient, and then want to drop out and, I don't know, make stained glass windows or join Goldman Sachs. Don't do that either. Stick with it. Take an occasional hiatus. Think about something else. Take up woodworking on the side. But stick with it, because this is, I won't say it's God's work, but this is really important work for the country.
And this point about patience, I mean, it's hard to be patient, and
Of course.
especially if you finally get into a position of authority at a foundation or in Washington or a state legislature.
Yes.
There's a sense
or the
to
Oval
say,
Office.
I've got my opportunity. By gosh, I'm going to do something big and dramatic.
True.
How does one, should one resist the temptation? How does one?
Well, it's irresistible, because everybody knows that their time in the spotlight is limited, and that somebody else will be in charge for 4 years, 5 years, 2 years later. That's why every president is told what you do in your first year is the only thing you'll ever be remembered for, because it's the only chance you've got of getting anything enacted. So put everything out there all at once. And of course, they never get everything they want. But there is some wisdom, at least in electoral politics, to getting started quickly before the next election comes around. Both so you have something to show in the next election, hopefully, and so that you don't wait for the next election to sweep you out of office. So no, you can never, in government, you'll never acquire total patience, because you're vulnerable to the next cycle taking over. But as a career, you can be patient and work at different angles from different places, and still be pursuing sort of loosely speaking the same goals in different ways. So I haven't mostly held the same job for very long, but I think I've pretty much pursued similar goals from different places.
If you had a chance to have a do-over on one thing that you did or didn't do or wrote or said, is there something that, because I think we've all had lots of those, and sometimes it's interesting to hear kind of somebody else.
Well, there's little stuff, like you never would have written the email that you accidentally sent to the wrong person. I mean, we've all had those where you have to apologize because the address got wrong. and somebody shouldn't have seen it saw it. So that's the easy stuff. The big stuff is hard to do over because so often the lesson took a while to learn. Like the enthusiasm for a policy change that occurred and then applauding it, encouraging it. I remember sitting in the East Room in 2001, when George W. Bush and Rod Page announced the No Child Left Behind Act, okay? Applauding vigorously at this attempt to import the successes of Texas and apply them to the whole country. Made sense at the time, okay. Should I have applauded? Should I have even been in the East Room? I mean, it took years. You and I, 5 years later, started writing stuff about this isn't working. But I didn't know it in 2001 or when it got enacted in 2002. It still felt right at the time. 4 years later, I could see things weren't working so well. But I don't know that that means I shouldn't have been applauding in the East Room.
Last question. You made mention of, people can get into this work by becoming educators, and there's also people who get into this space where they advocate or make policy. We've seen a lot of harsh words between people in classrooms and people in these advocacy and governmental roles over the last 5, 10, 15 years, going back probably forever. How do you think about that divide, and what are ways to more constructively approach it or bridge it?
Well, I'm not totally allergic to harsh words, and I'm not a deep believer in kumbaya policy. My most dreaded phrase is, let's round up the stakeholders and see if they can agree on. Because the only thing you ever get out of those meetings is, let's have more of what we're doing now.
And more meetings.
And more meetings. And everybody at the table should get a larger slice of a growing pie. So I really do believe that most policy choices have winners and losers, or better put, people who feel like this was worth doing and people who feel aggrieved that it was done or decided. Okay, and then they will fight back and push back, and there will be a course correction later. I mean, I think this is legitimate. I also think that policy people and classroom practitioners, for example, really are looking at different parts of this elephant. Some are touching the leg and some are touching the ear, and it's not. This doesn't feel like the same creature. Ultimately, it's the same elephant, but what they think it is, and their ability to push or tug is going to be very different. So I think I've got huge respect for the people who are in the classroom with 9-year-olds 6 hours a day, 180 days a year. But I also have huge respect for people who, whether they're a governor or a school superintendent or an anxious parent, who try to change the circumstance in which those people in the 4th grade classroom are practicing their craft.
So how much, in your view then, are these concerns about, quote unquote, war on teachers that one sees the unions talk about? How much of that is a product of honest disagreement between the people in the schools and folks who touch the elephant and see the elephant differently? And how much is people talking past one another or talking a different language?
It's a lot of the latter. I mean, it's rarely a war on teachers, incidentally. It's usually a war on teacher unions, which the union refracts as a war on teachers. And usually the people who are seeking change are seeking change in the rules by which teachers are trained, compensated, deployed, evaluated, things like that. Is that a war on teachers, or is that a war for better teachers, for more kids? But whether it's the ed schools or the unions or whoever is inconvenienced by the proposed change, or whose interests are threatened by the proposed change, will immediately declare that that is a war on teachers rather than a war on bad ed schools or impossibly obdurate teacher unions.
So, final thought, Checker. It's 2017. Donald Trump is in the White House. ESSA is the educational law of the land. After a half century of doing this work, are you more or less optimistic than you were when you were inspired by LBJ in '65?
Well, I'm less naive. I'm probably less optimistic in the short run, but I'm no less committed to the battle that this entails on behalf of kids that need a better shot and a country that needs a better educated population. So I haven't given up, and I'm not depressed by anything around us, but I no longer expect overnight turnover or trend, and I do expect these things to have cycles that I don't think I understood in 1965. Where we will move, 100 yards in this direction, and then we will move 50 yards in this direction, and then we will back up 10 yards.
Checker, thank you so much for taking the time.
Happy to do.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching part number 2 of this series on school reform from ESEA to ESSA. If you enjoyed what you saw, remember to like the video or leave us a comment. That's the end of this series on school reform from ESEA to ESSA. But be sure to check out the rest of our videos and research from AEI.